All right, so nice to see everybody. Go ahead, sit on something, a little bit of elevation to your hips. Cross your shins, one in front of the other. Flex your feet. Place your hands on your thighs, push down, lift the spine up. Push your feet into the floor as you push your hands down into your thighs, so your hips have to wake up a little bit. Take that nice deep breath in. Drop the shoulders as you exhale, but keep the chest lifted. Press the hands and the thighs again. Push the feet into the floor. Take another deep breath. On your exhale, draw your back ribs towards each other. Stretch your side rib forward. Lift your front ribs up. And by side rib, I just don't mean the floating bottom ribs. You got to lift all the ribs up to your armpit, the ribs on that side, and stretch them towards the world in front of you, and then lift all the front ones up. So it's not your backward bending, you're just engaging all sides around your rib cage. Let your chin stay lifted slightly, let your eyes close. Just kind of start breathing. Part of the practice of yoga is conversation with ourselves. Learning how to work with our body, what we're feeling, right? As an example, you go to a yoga class, you might have been the student or heard lots of students ask, you know, I'm feeling this, is that right? We're looking for some level of affirmation, but yoga doesn't give us that. It teaches us to affirm our own voice, our own language through our experience, so that when we're ready to say something, we know it comes from the right kind of place. Ready to know if the thing we're feeling in our hamstring is pain or if it's awareness. Ready to talk about the thoughts that go in our heads, our experience on the mat. And then even off the mat. Finding your voice to talk about the things that you see going on, regardless of how other people are going to feel or if it's going to cause trouble in your world, right? Let's be honest. It's horribly inconvenient sometimes to get on the yoga mat. You could totally be sitting on the couch and eating that whole cake. I love cake. It's really hard to get on the yoga mat sometimes. It's also really hard to have that conversation that might be difficult. So as you get into your practice, recognize it's not just a practice of stretching your hamstrings, but it's also learning to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. That regardless of the difficulties involved, no matter the level where it's you got to put the cake down like me to get on your yoga mat, or you have to have a difficult conversation with somebody, right? That's how we reverse the fortunes in our body. If I didn't put the cake down and get on my yoga mat, I wouldn't have the health I do today. We don't have the difficult conversations that we need to have. Who knows what we'll have tomorrow? So let your practice be a practice of empowerment, my friends, to recognize that you come through the hard things. And even though you may not see the why or what good it would do, right? Just like our first times in yoga classes, we don't know why we're having to stretch our hamstrings or turn ourselves upside down or try and hold our shin up to our chest. Something comes out of it that we feel better with. Then we have voice to it and we can go forward. We have to trust what we're going through, trust how we feel, and trust that even though we don't know the result, taking action with some clarity and wisdom that what we're doing is a good thing for ourselves, the world around us. Ultimately, how this practice gets off the mat and into the rest of our lives. Bring your palms together at the chest, let your thumbs touch your sternum. Spread your fingers slightly apart. Roll them shortly 3 times and then begin. Take a breath. Om. Flex your feet. Om. Oh. Bow your head. Salute the essence of yoga inside yourself. Bring your hands into your lap. Let your head rise and your eyes open. So nice to see everybody. Let's come to a standing position. Let's do some work. It may be hard, and even though the dog might protest, I didn't have to tell you all to lift your ribs. The dog told you for me. Stand on your yoga mat. Stand wide with your feet about 3.5 to 4 foot apart. Just our normal beginning posture. So, instead of, we'll start here. So normally you start with Dustin and we work a little bit of balance and stuff like that. We're going right to this to continue working the hips and the range of motion of the hips to get to more comfortable levels of Padmasana, lotus, and things like that. Turn your right toes out towards the room to the right. Turn your upper body around to face out over your right thigh. So turn your left toes in a little more, rotate your thigh, your hips towards the right leg. Bend the right knee into warrior one. So just like in your seated poses, push down more through the feet. Feel the thigh flex. Feel the resistance of movement now as you bend the knee. Try to relax your low back from pushing down to your pelvis. Lift your low back away from your pelvis. Right on the back side of your pelvis is your sacral plate. It's just above your tailbone. It's right below your spine. It's that flat part of your upper buttock. Push it towards the front side of your pelvis a little bit, not tucking your glutes necessarily, but from the piriformis muscles, it's the center back side of your pelvis, moves forward, not from each side, but from the center right at the sacral plate. It's not quite tucking your tailbone, but it's just you not letting your front pelvis muscles grip and push your lower back back. You have to move the back side of the pelvis forward to lift your spine up taller, and then rotate your hips more, rotate your ribs more. Interlace your fingers behind you so your hands are touching your glutes, and slide your hands towards your left thigh. So even though you might be tight, you can take both hands just to the outside of your left thigh and push them into the thigh to twist your ribs to the right more. So you stretch that right shoulder a little bit. So as both hands move to the left, turn your torso to the right so your chest bone faces out over your right thigh a little more better. And you get a shoulder opening to this. I would prefer if you could do it with the elbows straight, but if you can only start to move your hands to the left with them bent, that's okay to bend them. You start working it out. Take a nice breath. Push down through the feet more, bend the knee deeper, challenge yourself a little bit. Straighten your right leg, turn your toes in, turn your left toes out. Rotate your pelvis to the left, your ribs to the left. So your upper body faces over your left thigh. Push down through the feet, bend the knee deeper. And as you keep pushing down through the foot, feel which part of the foot you're pushing down through the hardest, and push down through that other part that's not being pushed down more. So if your pressure's on your big toes, put some in your pinky toe and your heel. It's on your heel, put it in your big toe, pinky toe. And continue that kind of constant check-in to where can I create that equal balance in my foot so I feel my thigh flex and it becomes harder to bend my knee. The knee becomes very easy to bend and feels like you can go super low in this pose if you're not actually engaging your leg muscles to create some level of lift. Remember, part of the stuff how we create healthy range of motion with the muscles is just not to push on a unengaged muscle to stretch it, but to stretch a flexed muscle to give it healthier range of motion. Right? We work against the challenge. Interlace your fingers behind your back and try to take both hands to the outside of your right hip. Start by bending your elbow a little bit just to start opening it up. And then you got to push the hands against that hip to get your upper back a little flexed so you can rotate a little better. It's tricky, but you know, you start moving those shoulders across. Just as we've talked about in past classes about, and we've worked towards some of the different arm rotation and movements that get done in our seated poses. You know, we do more with our arms than just stretch forward and push them on the ground. They wrap around us, they go behind us. They create a level of health in the shoulder, upper back, and neck that is very good for the low back over time. Take a breath or two. Bring your body up. Turn your left toes in. Take both hands onto the floor in front of you. Standing straddle stretch. Push down through the outer heels. Flex the thighs, rotate the thighs internally so you can push the thigh bone back a little bit. Open the hips, groin, lower lumbar. Now, if you're keeping your hands on blocks or on a chair, that's okay. Or if your hands are on the ground, that's okay. Keep your legs where they are. Look at and make sure your hips are in line with your heels, that your hips aren't coming too far forward, nor are you leaning too far back. Push down through the feet. Walk your hands out in front of you as far as you can go. On your fingertips only. No, don't take your palms down to anything. If you're on a chair, fingertips on the seat of the chair. If you're on a block, move your blocks out, fingertips on the block. And as you stretch the front side of the chest away from your hips, stretch the arm from the armpit down to the palm away from you. Hips push back though, so it's more like you're extending downward dog. There you go. So your chest hangs down, but your arms stretch out. There you go, Pratima. Really keep extending those arms out here. So there has to be, try to only make the arms be a balance point thing. And your legs do most of the work of holding your body upright. So as much as your arms stretch away from your ribs, push your thighs back harder, move your hips back an inch or two just to kind of give yourself a little wiggle room and feel what it is for your legs to be the only thing that holds you up. So now you're not even trying to push down, you just stretched your arms out, you've stretched your hips back. Everything that's happening from your low back to your rib cage is gravity. So take a breath, let your head hang, and then feel your rib cage. And are you gripping around your upper back or flexing anywhere? Try to relax it. The arms extending are the arms, just on the fingertips. Let your ribs hang. Let your lower back hang. Let your abdomen hang. Let go of those parts and pieces that want to stay into this tense grip and shape, and listen to it for a minute. And just work your legs more. And then if you feel something gripping still, like, oh, my low back just doesn't feel like it moves, there's your grip. You're fighting that. You may not be conscious of it, but now you've eliminated some of the other stuff. You know, now it's your back or it's your chest or your neck. Try to hold the pose for a few more seconds with the fingers stretched out, just on your fingertips, your thighs stretched back, and see what you can relax into that lets the spine decompress. So the back side of your pelvis moves towards the groin or towards the front side of the pelvis. Your low back moves towards your abdomen, so forth. It's easy to overwork in the arms, and once we overwork in the arms, it's easy to overwork the neck, shoulder, back. Make your legs do their work. Bend your knees a little, walk your hands back under your chest. Bring your body back upright. Bring your feet together for a moment and take a moment, grab a bolster or a blanket or a couch cushion or a pillow from your couch or chair, whatever, anything for a little bit of cushioning for your knee. You're going to lay the bolster across your mat. And you're going to kneel with both knees on the bolster. Some of you have done this in my past classes where we've used standing poses that are a little closer to the ground, right? We remove the shin, foot, knee issue of it. Get a little deeper in the hips. So with both knees starting on the bolster, you're not sitting on your feet or anything like that. Step your right foot forward. So your right foot is flat to the floor, just slightly out in front of your right knee. Pause for a second, push your left thigh, your left knee down into the bolster. And if you can push the top of your left foot down into the floor, that would be great. And now from here, we can do a few different kind of pose variations to start creating some rotation. Take both hands onto the floor, onto the inside of your right foot. Push your left knee down. So let's explore the twist. Take your right hand onto your right knee, push your right hand into your right knee, and twist to your right, moving your left ribs towards your right inner thigh. Now, when you do that, notice how much your hips swung to the left. If you push your left thigh down into the knee, keep your left glute fired, you're going to keep your pelvis from tilting. You're going to make the work happen from your back. So this is a fairly straight spine for most of us. And in past classes, you've heard me talk about holding your spine really rigid actually creates a misalignment of the S-curve of the spine. So now you're twisting to your right. Notice how much farther your abdomen or your chest is away from your inner right thigh or your inner right knee as compared to your abdomen. I know that, they're just closer together, but your chest is leaned back. Almost everyone's chest is leaned so far back because there's the tendency to think that we have to straighten our spine in this. No, the spine isn't straight to begin with. Move your left hand closer to your inner right foot. Move your ribs the same distance to your right thigh as your abdomen and then twist. It's going to feel like a little bit of slouch, but don't let your left hip fall to the side. You got to keep your left hip pulled to the right. Because if you let your left hip swing, if you let your pelvis swing to the left or right, instead of keeping it stacked above the bolster, all you're doing is twisting your low back and groin. You're not actually moving your upper back. So it's a slouch. Remember, I've said this in last classes, stop trying to hold your chest up like this. Stretch your upper back into the pose. So from your left bottom ribs, stretch down through the arm and twist. Move this back. Not twist. Take your right hand back to the floor. Take, if you can, and for some of you, this is a bit of a stretch. If you need a block or anything, take your elbows to blocks or try to take your elbows down to the floor. And again, take a look at your left hip and knee and make sure your left hip is right above your left knee and keep it there. And then take a look at your right hip and kind of feel, is your right hip and left hip, are they kind of equal, or is your back twisted so your left side is longer than your right? Pull your right hip back. Push your left thigh down. Try to find a level of balance in this hip that you don't get. You get with seated poses more, but you don't get with these, just to be aware of how much you're twisting your pelvis up to make up for tight hip, tight knee. Or tight hip, tight knee, tight back. Keep your left elbow where it is. Place your right hand back on your knee. Don't let your hips move. Keep your right thigh flexed. Keep your glutes fired. Don't let your hips twist or fall or come out from above the bolster. Push your right hand into your thigh, twist, and move your upper ribs towards your right inner knee. So there's a lengthening action. The legs are pulling the hips back and keeping them stable. The arm is helping you rotate and helping you stretch the upper back away from the lower back. So rotate on that. You don't have to go hard because you don't have to twist very much to actually feel it. The trick is to stretch your stretch your left back muscles into the twist more without losing your legs. So you really have to kind of deal with all this tight upper back stuff that's going to make your seated poses hard, right? You ever sit in a seated pose and you kind of slouch backwards and you just can't find the ability to sit upright? Because your back's tight. The upper back especially. Untwist. Step your right foot back onto the bolster. Step your left foot forward. Take both hands onto the floor, the inside of the foot. Do not take your elbows down yet. Test this side out, same as the other. Check your hips. Left hip or left hip stays next to right hip. Left hip stretches back, so it's even with the right. Flex your right thigh and push the right knee into the floor so your right hip is stable. You know if it's going to move or swing. Try not to let it. Take your left hand onto your left knee. Twist. And again, the distance between abdomen and inner thigh is very different than chest and inner thigh. Because for most of us, when we twist, we shorten and lean back. So pull your ribs without swinging your pelvis. Pull your ribs towards your right or your left inner thigh. Knee. Down, forward, straighten the leg. Pull this back. More. Right hip wants to roll towards your left foot. Do not let it. Pull your right hip back so it stays above the right knee joint. So you have to be very aware of the conscious action of your hips to make up for your upper back. And then stop it. So we have to be conscious, you know. This is a hard thing to do. Hard to constantly check in with yourself. Have that conversation with, oh, why can't I get my hip to move? Move your ribs into it, not away from your thigh. Yeah. So your right hip pulls back, so you stretch your right back ribs towards your right or your left inner thigh and knee. Untwist. Take both elbows down to a block or to the floor, your call. Or you keep your elbows straight, your call too. There's no mandatory. It's your yoga practice. You've got to have the conversation with yourself in it. Keep your right hip back above the right knee. Keep your left hip down. Now take your left hand onto your left knee. And before you twist, already think about moving your right ribs towards your inner left thigh first. Make that the start of your twist. Instead of throwing your shoulders back and getting into your low back, already start, push the left hand in, and make most of your movement about drawing your right ribs towards the left side while you keep your legs stable. Very nice. Good, Pratima. Nice, Lena. Christy Oshwini, good job. Laura, I can see your painting, but I can see your elbow. So I'm going to assume you're doing good. Ina approves. What a joke. Okay, finish the last few seconds off. Check your hips. Make sure they're still level. Rotate your right ribs into it by pushing the left hand. Right, the left hand isn't to throw your left ribs and shoulders back, but your left hand's to help you lift the left ribs up so you can flex that back, stretch that upper right back towards that inner left thigh. Good. This is the way you start to really stretch your lower back into your hips without making it about the hip manipulation. Go ahead and untwist. Step your left foot back onto the bolster. Step your right foot forward. So now Keep your left hip above your left knee. Take your left elbow towards your right thigh. You can get your left elbow on top of your right thigh, great. Already feel the distance and difference from your left shoulder to your left rib. So that side is nice and long now. That's part of the stretch. If you pushed your left elbow down into your left knee or your left forearm, right, you're connecting those two stable points. Stretch your right arm straight out to the right, away from your shoulder and arm. And then stretch it even farther, like you're trying to reach out for something far away from you. So you feel your right shoulder blade have to flex. And now twist, rolling your left ribs towards your inner right thigh again, but sliding your left arm across your right thigh. So you're sliding from the forearm to the elbow to the tricep. Still stretching your right arm out to your side. Don't even take your right arm up to the air. Don't worry about taking your right arm up. Stretch it away from your shoulder so it's in line with your chest bone. One continuous line. And only twist by stretching sliding your left elbow past your right thigh. So it's this constant gliding action of that movement. So your left shoulder blade has to open. But don't lose your hips. Left hip has to stay above left knee. And then once you've slid your arm as far as it can go, then push the arm into the leg and then rotate it a little bit. Rotate your ribs some more. So your right arm starts to float up from the chest moving up. Yeah, just like that. It's a very simple rotation action that we would do like in side angle. It's very hard, and one of the reasons side angle is so difficult is we lose the stability of the pelvis, and then our groin can't hold us up, and our back tightens up, and then we go, why can't I do this pose? There's one of my students would say, it's making me really hate my fat. And I say that about myself, but it's not that. It's about, can we keep the stability so the muscles that we have to be engaged in this movement and rotation? Can we integrate more of ourselves into this, our strength? Untwist. I think, switch your legs. I think one of the things that is a disservice to how we talk about our body in yoga, or at least the way this culture does, is that, well, you got to be flexible. Well, flexibility is seen as kind of an opposite of strength almost. We're all very strong. Let's use our strength, find our strength and our stability, and learn how to move it and use it safely. Left foot out forward, left and right hip are even. Take your right elbow to your left knee. Once you take your forearm or elbow to the knee, whatever degree you're starting at, check with your hips. Don't let your right hip fall forward and your left hip go back farther. Keep those as equal as possible. If there was a wall that we could put you up against and your left leg not be in the way, or your bottom leg, your right leg be in the way, I would totally do it. So now, keep your legs active, keep your hips stable. Slide your right arm across the knee and the thigh more, so you're moving towards the elbow and the back side of the elbow to your tricep. And just work your hips stable and try to stretch from that right side. Take your left arm out, stretch it out to the side of the body so the arm is in line with the chest bone. And now push your right arm into the leg to start the movement. And even though you may not rotate your ribs a whole lot, you feel that strength flexing, and that strength is moving in such a way, not to push your chest away from the thigh, but to keep your chest moving towards it, but rotate your left ribs up and your right ribs down. So you've got this rotation that's kind of a very modified form of revolved side angle. But really, it's super difficult. Prajna, step your left foot forward more, dear. Your balance is going to be very challenged like that. There you go. It's so challenging to do this because, one, you can't break into your old hip habits. And the reason this is important to practice before, as we kind of get into exploring more seated poses, is that I guarantee if you do it standing, you do it seated. You torque and twist your hips one way versus the other. We do it more seated because because we sit in very soft couches. We can lean and fall. Last few seconds, move your ribs by pulling the left ribs up and the right ribs across towards the thigh by sliding the arm farther across the leg. All right, untwist. Come off the bolster. Stand wide on your yoga mat. Take your hands onto the floor in front of you, standing straddle stretch, Prasada Padottanasana. Toes turned in slightly. Walk your hands as far away from you as you can without falling your hips forward, but your thighs are pushing your hips back. Same thing we did earlier. So only fingertips. Why do you people want to keep slapping your palm on your floor? Don't get handsy with your floor. Pratama, lean your hips back 4 inches. Walk your hands closer to your mat. And now lean your hips back, dear. You remember pushing the blocks into the wall? Think about, everyone imagine you had a block or two in your thud and push into the block. Remember your thud is that space between your thigh and your butt. And push your thuds into the invisible blocks. And then stretch your fingertips, stretch the armpit towards the palm and the fingertips away from those blocks. And then let everything else between your arms and your hips hang. Let stuff on the back hang, let stuff on the front hang. So that, like, imagine if we poured a little bit of water right at the base of your spine, it would just run down the trench of your back. Make a waterfall. And right now, some of our waterfalls have some humps in them, but that's okay. It's a prettier waterfall. But that's the action. You don't want to push down. You want to let gravity do some work here. Trust your legs to do more. Put most of your focus and your attention into your feet and into your hands. Take a nice breath. Exhale, up you come. Great, bring your feet together. Grab a bolster or blanket or whatever you're using for your personal seated device. And dim them. Eyes can't take it. That's right. Eyes can't take it. Have a seat on your bolster. Stretch both legs wide into a seated straddle stretch. Konasana. Classic seated pose. So lovely. Toes to point straight up, center of the knee to point straight up. Push your heels, push whatever part of your leg is already touching the floor harder into the floor. So if that's only your heels, push your heels down harder. That doesn't mean push your knee down because your knee's not touching the floor, right? The knee may go down, but if you actually push on something that's not touching the earth, you're going to just stress it out. That's helping gravity beat you up and not working against gravity. Bolster counts as floor. That's a good question. Remember, when you're seated on props, any prop that's pushing into that's touching the ground, supporting you, counts as floor. As my teacher would say, someone can't get to the floor, you bring the floor to them. Push the hips into the bolster harder. Push the heels and flex the legs so it almost feels like you're going to fall backwards. Take your left hand to your outer right thigh. Take your right hand back behind you and reach for the top of your left thigh. If you are, even if you can't, your fingers might touch your sacral plate, stuff like that. Now, before we twist, we're going to perform a little bit of an experiment to kind of set home this idea of the overly flexed upper back versus the natural curve in the lifted ribs and the abdominals. Stuff I've been talking about for weeks. If I said to you, push your heels down, keep your hips engaged. Straight, lift your spine up tall and straighten it, and then twist to your right. Do it and feel what happens. Feel how far you twist. Feel how one leg kind of stops working. Feel how your left hip shifted forward on the bolster. Feel how you're waiting for me to get past this moment to teach you the actual lesson. Ha, ha, ha. So stop twisting as hard. Keep your left hand to the outside of the right thigh. Reset your hips so your thighs are pressing, or your hips are pressing down, your heels are pressing down. Right arm's behind. Take a breath and think about how to say this in a fun way, how to say this in a way that's going to help. Pull your bottom front ribs back so you feel like you're broadening up between the shoulder blades and just below them. Widen from your spine out to your side ribs. So pull your front ribs back, lift your head up. Don't pull your chest up. Don't push your chest down. Pull your chest back so the back side of the body broadens. Pull your head up to lift what you need to. Now, when you pull with your left arm, don't try to move your shoulder. Go to your back left ribs and stretch your back left ribs around towards the front. Give them a direction to go. Move your back left ribs towards your front inner right thigh. Connect those two pieces towards each other. And then feel the difference in your twist. What's the difference, Tris? She's speechless.
Yeah.
She doesn't even know. So just recognize that if we hold our spines upright like that, we're locking a lot of the mobility of our back only into our lower back. Move your front ribs to your back ribs. You're not compressing down. You're just pulling your body weight. You're pulling your muscular action to the back body to be wide. And then stretch your back left ribs. Imagine those back left ribs wrapping around towards the front into a circular motion towards your inner right thigh. And then you can do the same on the front. Your back front right ribs, pull back and wrap around towards the outside of your left thigh. Give yourself two connector points to move these things to. All right, untwist.
I feel it much more in my mid upper back, not my neck.
Tristan said she felt it much more in her mid upper back and not her neck. Hallelujah. Right hand to the outer left thigh, left hand wraps around behind you. And this takes a little bit. And I know it can feel weird and sound counteractive to what we've all been taught. I was even taught, try to lift and straighten your spine a ton. It was wrong. You look at any picture of the old teachers, Mr. Angar, in their proper forms, their chests are not caved down, they're pulled back, and their upper backs are super wide and mobile. All their seated poses are like that. Right hand to the outer left thigh. Put your heels down, push your hips down. We're not going to do the super straight spine one, I don't care. Front ribs, don't roll your shoulders to your neck. Be careful of that. It all starts here in the bottom ribs. Remember the 3 bands if you've been in my twisting classes. We've really broken those down. Those 3 bands pull back to widen the other side of them. We can think about the front side widening easy. Now you're shortening the front slightly to widen the back ones more. So once this moves back, the back side widens. So you got to take that tension out of your back you hold, right, to push your chest up. Drop that tension, drop your shoulders, pull your head up high, and then twist by your back right ribs, stretching around towards your inner left thigh. Front left ribs, pull back, rotate around the back towards your outer right thigh. There you go. Put the weight on the left hip. And remember, the head wants to twist and do the turn. Don't let it. Lift your head up high as you're widening the back body. That will teach those muscles as your trapezius connects to your neck, your cervical to work and stretch. After we're done with some of the seated stuff, probably the end of this month, we're going to get into a whole host of work about our neck muscles. Don't lean as hard, Laura. That's very good. Good rotation. Just don't fold at your hips as much. Now lean back just a hair more, dear. And now rotate your back right ribs around. No, don't pull your chest into it. You're learning. It's all right. Take a few breaths. Head up. Widen the back muscles. And then rotate the wide back muscles. All right, untwist. Body doesn't know what it's doing. No.
It's strange.
Yeah. And Tristan says that my body doesn't even know when it's doing there. And this is true. When I was starting to kind of figure a lot of this out, it was really hard to even figure out. Like for years, I kept doing these deep twists to try and get my arms to wrap and all that, but nothing was moving. And I started looking at pictures of the old teachers and how their upper backs, they're not holding their backs perfectly rigid, like, you know, straight up and down. When they do twist, they widen their upper back so deep so they get this great release of the tension along the spine. Very interesting, especially useful for now, and will continue to be. Bring your thighs together, feet together, and it will come to play when we do the next stuff, and probably next month. Both legs straight in front of you, Dandasana. I'll pontificate less about the future, and we'll stay in the present moment of ow, right? Not of now, of ow. When we have public classes again, I'm going to change my class schedule to that. The moment of ow. Bend your both knees a little bit. Slide your right foot under your left thigh. Point the foot. Let the right knee kind of fall down. Pull your left foot towards you, and if you can put your left foot up on your right knee, do so. So working towards Padma. Now we're not doing as many of the poses we've done in last week's because I assume everyone here, because it's mostly the same group of people, trust me, there's not a whole lot of people signing up for the yoga class, have been practicing. So if you haven't, I'm going to know. Not like I can do anything about it, but I'm going to know. First off, make sure your left foot is up on your right knee, not on your inner calf. Thank you. Secondly, remember to point both feet. Actively stretch through each side of the foot. Now it's easy when we're kind of working the foot, twist it one way where we only kind of point the stretch from the outer heel to the pinky toe and the inner heel to the big toe. Really lengthen both sides of that foot. This will cause an arch cramp if you do it correctly for a lot of us because we collapse on one part and don't use that part of the foot. Good. Point the feet, push both feet down into their respective surfaces. Just for a moment. We're going to warm up here as we kind of work our way in. Good. Nice. Stan Bratton, that's really good. Good hip work there. Pratima, really think about pointing your bottom foot. Yeah, there you go. Stretch that big toe side of that foot. Yeah, stretching the big toe side of the foot, if you do it a lot, you will learn how to get really strong arches. It will help people with collapsed feet. The more you learn to point from the inner heel out through the big toe, can really change the arch of your foot. It's one of the ways I got my arches back post the Navy. It also pushes you back correctly because now you're engaging the inner thigh to your inner groin. Remember, when you're in the seated poses, you're pushing down through your legs to a degree to almost push your body back so that any movement you do is from a very lifted lower spine, not from you pushing it forward, but from your legs lifting you up. So push down, push, point from the inner heel to the big toe, push down. And then, if you can pull your left foot a little closer to your right hip. And then slide your right foot out past your left knee. Pause there. This is like step 2. If you need to stay at step 1, stay at step 1. Point your feet. Point the big toe side of the foot as much as your pinky toe side. This big toe side's harder because big toe side means your inner thighs have to work. Your inner knee has to stretch. And if you're going to mess a knee up in a seated pose, it'll be the inner knee. So remember the rules. If your left knee hangs on the floor, just rests on the floor, then you can pull your foot up. But if it doesn't, you have to kind of sit in it and go, what did I do to my hip? You have to have a hard conversation with myself. It's like, do I want my Padmasana to look like this? How much cake did I eat? I live 5 minutes from a Japanese bakery. I ate a lot of cake. You know. Point your feet. Now, especially your bottom foot, because the bottom foot is the one that's going to reset a lot of it. So point your big toe. That's flex, Pratima. Point the foot. There you go, dear. Nice, just point and push down. And over time, as you push each foot into the respective surface, thigh or floor, the hips open. But work on that feeling, not of you leaning into it to press it down, but to press down is to almost make you fall backwards. Your legs are so active and flexed. Have that hard conversation with yourself. Come on, get in it. If your left knee is on the floor, then you can grab your right foot and pull it up onto your left thigh. Start on your left knee first, and then you can slowly work it towards the hip. But if your left knee is not on the floor, as Mr. Anger would say, there is no point in going forward. You're not even in step 2. And trust me, no one here wants the knee injuries like I've had doing this dumb pose. I call it a dumb pose. I love it a lot, but I love a lot of dumb things. Work the legs. And now let's add a twist. Because actually there's a lot of twisting and backward arm stuff that happens from here. So it all applies to this upper back stuff. Stay in step 1, 2, or 3 with your legs. Step 3 being full lows. Left leg's on top. So take your right hand to your outer left thigh. Take your left hand back behind you like you're going to grab your left big toe. And if you can grab your left big toe, by all means, start practicing that. Now, I'm going to tell you, if you're leaning your spine really tall and you're trying to reach your hand behind you to grab your toe, you will never get it. You want to know a secret? You have to slouch a little bit, pull your front ribs to your back ribs so your shoulder blade releases, so the shoulder blade can then wrap around and grab the foot. If you do this where you hold your spine up rigid, the shoulder never moves. We get shoulder injuries doing that. So pull, regardless of where your hand is, your left hand is touching the hip, it's on your sacral plate, pulled it around or whatever, you got your big toe. Take a breath, pull your front ribs to your back ribs, push your feet down into the floor, and then twist by stretching your back right ribs towards your left knee and your left ribs away towards your left foot. Don't lean away from the twist, nor do you fold at the hips towards it. You're trying to find that point where you're not making your upper back pull out of the pose like it's pulling your head back. Your spine is lifted, but it's broader on the back side of the body than the front side of the body. Because if you're doing it right, we're going to have a small moment of experiment. If you're here, right, your hand's behind you. Take a moment, take a nice deep breath of wherever you are. Feel the difficulties. Feel how deep you can breathe in. Now, lift your spine up really tall and rigid. Now breathe. It's like your breath gets stuck in your middle back. That's what we lock our breath off. You remember, every yoga pose is supposed to help us breathe deeper. So if we hold our spine up rigid, you actually can't breathe past your diaphragm very well. Widen your back, draw your front ribs towards your back ribs. Because remember, your lungs touch your back ribs. So you're making space there. And now take a breath. If you can breathe past your diaphragm, you're in the right level of twist. Untwist, stretch your legs out. We will twist to the other side when we switch our legs. Start in Dandasana for a second, just reset. Bend your knee slightly, pull your left foot under your right thigh. Point your foot. Get used to this. Bend your right knee, pull your right foot up onto your left knee, if you can. And just work here for the next minute or so and point your feet. Tristan's already having a foot cramp. That's nice. Make sure each foot is pushing down into the respective surface, not pushing the knees down. I cannot emphasize that enough, and I'm going to keep saying it for a while because, one, I always got to fill time, and two, it's always a good reminder. So as you push each foot down, try to experiment with the difference, kind of like leaning some weight into the foot. But what different muscles can help with that? Flex your quads, these large muscles of the bone of the leg, and try flexing that. Keep that flex and push down. You might find your knee releases. Mine does. You push your feet down. Like my left leg tends to not want to push its foot into the floor, so I have to really focus on that. As you point and stretch from the inner heel down this big toe and the outer heel to the pinky toe, so you're stretching them long and pointing down. If this feels okay, you want to go further, pull your right heel very close to your left hip joint. Mr. Iyengar would say the heel goes into the outer edge of the foot goes to the insertion of the thigh into the pelvic ring. Very good, Prajma. That is good placement. Nice, Laura. Yeah, it's very good. Laura doing great. Lena, that's very good. Staying at that level. Your bottom foot's really good. Your husband's foot. Point your bottom foot, St. Jeff. Thank you. Your top foot's good. Your bottom foot, just because you can't see it doesn't mean you don't work it. Slide your bottom foot past your knee. But keep them both pointed and active. And just push the feet down. You might go, why is this harder this week than it was last week? I don't know. What'd you do differently? That's your conversation to have with yourself. We'll just give it a moment here, pushing each foot down before we give some people the chance to go to stage 3. But remember, even if you know that you can go farther than this, there's an old saying that goes, I wish I could go back to, X, Y, or Z point in my life knowing what I know now. Well, if you can go farther than this, aren't you glad you have the opportunity to go back to stage 1, 2, or whatever, knowing what you knew so you could do something better or different? Every time you get on the yoga mat, it's the way to practice that. It's where you apply wisdom to yourself. Again, so we can get comfortable doing that to go do it out into the world. All right, if you're going to go farther, and remember, the rule is you can go past this point if your knee lays on the floor without you having to push it down. Tristan's having your tight right hip day. She had some dental work done, so probably on her way. Probably has nothing to do with it. I'm just trying to make a bad joke. If you want, you can pull your left foot up onto the knee or then closer to your hip if you're going to stage 3, full Padmasana. But then you still have to be able to press both feet down. Almost feel like you're going to fall back. Take your left hand to your outer right thigh. Take your right hand back behind you. You can grab your toe with your hand. Great, go for it. Left hand just rests on the outer right thigh. Now push both feet down. Pull your front ribs to your back ribs to take the overly rigidness out of your spine. Take a breath. And if you're not sure if you're slouching, quote unquote, enough, take a breath. And if you feel like you can only breathe like to your mid back and like grips or seizes a little bit, it means you're not doing it. You're holding too much straight. Pick your head up high, pull your front ribs to your back ribs, and then exhale. Pull your left ribs towards your inner right knee. And pull your right ribs towards your right foot. It's just behind. And just work the rotation. Laura, lean back slightly. Don't make it as much how you put the pelvis. There you go. Keep your head up nice and tall. Your upper back looks really good. So the thing is that we can overly slouch our shoulders to our neck. You want to keep your head pulled up nice and tall because this is what's going to work the muscles of your neck and create a healthy curve in your cervical. Just take the twist for a few seconds and breathe deep into it. Always use your breath as a marker on your twist. And just for a moment, rigid your spine up straight like you want to, and then feel how your breath gets kind of locked up. And then exhale, widen those back muscles away from the spine, and then rotate that again. So you're breathing into a deeper twist that goes from the bottom of your spine up. Your breath goes from the bottom of your diaphragm to the top of your lungs. Fun fact, your diaphragm goes all the way to the top of your pelvis to your bottom ribs, and then your lungs go from your bottom ribs up to the top of your rib cage. So you can literally have breath from your pelvis to your neck. So fill it. You're just going to jump your head forward like an orc.
I don't know what to do.
On your head.
But I have.
Yeah, that's fine. All right, untwist. Lay on your backs. Have a savasana for a moment. Remember, take the time to get that extra comfortable setup. So even if you only get 10 seconds of savasana, it's 10 seconds of nirvana savasana rather than 2 minutes of God, I can't wait for class to end. Let your eyes close, come away from the roof of your mouth. Deep breath in, slow breath out. Take a moment and rest, my friends. Rest with your breath. Feel the work you've done, the struggle that is you. So that's what it is to live. It is a struggle. But the struggle is not there to wear us down, to take us from a perfect state to a wounded or tarnished or a bruised state. I believe the struggle is to make us stronger, to show us what we can do. And how we engage with it and take what we take from that struggle is up to us. It's part of our wisdom experience. Even in Harry Potter, they had a whole house of people that did nothing but read books so the Gryffindors could go off and fight dragons. You got to have that part that's your experience, it's your knowledge, applied to the struggle of you fighting your own dragon. So each practice is that, my friends. So rest from your struggle for a moment. Let all that you went through not wear you down, but strengthen you. Not just be strong in the body, but wise in the heart and the mind. And rest and enjoy the fruits of your yogic practice.